Okay, P7. For this week's numeracy lessons, I'm just going to make a few short videos just to help you with the understanding because it's a little bit fiddly. Obviously, you can pause the video at any point. You can go back, you can go forward if you need to. I'll try to keep it simple as possible. Okay, so this is for the first lesson. This is for Monday's lesson where we're learning about the number that comes before a given decimal number. Okay, so we'll start off just by being very obvious and very simple. I'm going to put a 6 here in the tens column and a 5 here in the units column, or sometimes, as you can see on this chart, they call it the ones column. Okay, so this number is 65. Very straightforward, 65. At the moment, it doesn't have anything in the tenths or the hundredths column, so I'm just going to put a 7 here in the tenths column and keep it nice and simple. So it says 65.7. Okay, so very simple. That's a given decimal number. It has 6 tens, it has 5 units or 5 ones, and 7 tenths. Absolutely nothing in the thousands, the hundreds, or the hundredths. And in a second, we'll be looking at a place value chart that has thousandths as well. Okay, so if you look at your task today, the tasks are different depending on which group you're in as usual. I'm going to start with circles. Okay, in the circles group, it says quite clearly, complete the table below by finding the number before when you count in tenths. Now, this part of the question is very, very important. It's all before today. And for circles, you're looking at tenths. You're just moving backwards by a tenth. You're subtracting. You're decreasing by a tenth. Okay? You'll notice if you're in squares and triangles, or if you do the squares and triangles today, you'll be going before. You'll be subtracting. You'll be going backwards. You'll be decreasing, but by hundredths or hundredths, depending on how you want to say it. And then if you're in hexagons and pentagons, it's still before today, and you're counting in thousandths. So that's the task today. We're all working, trying to find a number before a given decimal number, and the difference really is whether you're working in thousandths, hundredths, or tenths, and that will say at the top of your sheet. So let's pretend we're in circles group. The given decimal number is 65.7, and the question says, what is 1/10 less? When you count in tenths, what comes before 65.7? So I'm not going to take anything away from the tens column because I'm only subtracting from the tenths. I'm not going to take anything away from the ones column or the units column because I'm subtracting from the tenths. So these two columns can still stay 6 and a 5. 65. The decimal point doesn't need to change or move or anything like that. And we're just going to subtract 1 from the tenth column. There's a 7 tenths at the moment. 7 tenths. So 7 tenths, take away 1/10, would obviously be 6 tenths. So I'm going to put 6 here. So when you count in tenths, the number that comes before 65.7 is, of course, 65.6. The number that comes before 65.7 is 65.6 when you count in tenths. Now that's important to remember. So let's just go back and look at circles activity and just do one as an example. So, I'll look at this one here. This number says 908.8. Now remember, finding the number before when you count in tenths. So I don't need to subtract from the hundreds column. I don't need to subtract from the tens column. I don't need to subtract even from the units or the ones column. I'm going to subtract from the tenths. So my answer would be 908.7. The reason that's 908.7 because we're finding a number before when we count in tenths. We've taken 1/10 away from 8 tenths and we get 7 tenths. Now there are some more challenging questions here. The ones I would like to draw your attention to will be 20 here. Obviously you can't take away a tenth from 0, so you have to go across the tens barrier. So if you think, for example, 20 take away 1 equals 19, or 20 subtract 0.1, what would that be? I'll give you a clue. It will be 19 point something. Okay, 19 point something. And that'll be similar here for this question down at the bottom. And I think that's the rest. Or here on 49 as well. Okay, so that's circles work today. In circles, you're thinking of subtracting a tenth from the tenth column, finding the number that comes before a given number when counting in tenths. Okay, now if we look at squares and triangles work, it's extremely similar. Your challenge, I'll make this stuff go away. Your question in squares and triangles work says quite clearly, complete the table below, find a number before, again, subtracting, decreasing, but when you count in hundreds, okay, so you're not taking away from the tenths column here. You're taking away from the hundreds column. But the task should still be the same. So if I keep this number, 6 tenths, 5 units, 65, 6 tenths and 5 ones. Here we have 7 tenths and 6 hundredths. But I'm going to pretend that I'm in squares and triangles. This time I'm subtracting from the hundredths. I'm finding what comes one before the hundredths. So I'm still going to have 6 in my tens column. I'm still going to have 5 in my ones column. I'm still going to have 7 in my tenths column. But because I'm finding one less, or the number before, sorry, when we count in hundredths or hundredths, I'm going to do 6 hundredths, take away 1 hundredth, which of course would be 5 hundredths. So when you count in hundredths, the number that comes before 65.76 is 65.75, because we're counting in hundredths for squares and triangles work. Let's have a look at the squares and triangles work and give an example. So if I look at this one, it says 122.67. I don't need to subtract anything from the hundreds, from the tens, from the units, from the tenths. No, I subtract from the hundredths, because that's what it says at the top here. You find the number before when you count in hundredths. So we're looking at 122.66. It's 66 because we've subtracted 1 hundredth from the hundredths column. Okay, now be careful. There are some that might be a bit tricky. For example, this one says 189.10. Sorry, I'm going to put that completely wrong, P7. This says 189.1, but we've left the 0 here for a reason. Okay, so if you take away 100 from 189.1, you actually have 189.0 something. I wonder what it could be. Similarly, you could have a problem here with taking away 20. When you do this, think about money. If you have £20 and you take away 1 pence, what do you have? And again, looking down here at this number, that could give you a similar problem. It's quite useful to think of pounds and pence when you're subtracting hundredths. Okay, so that's squares and triangles work. Now finally, let's have a look at the hexagons and pentagons work again. Now if it says find the number before when you count in thousands, so we're subtracting 1 from the thousands column. Okay, not the tenths like circles were today, not the hundredths like squares and triangles were. We're working in this column, in the thousands column. So let's look at my place value chart, and I have a different one to look at now. This place value chart has tenths, hundredths, but also thousands. As you can see to the left, it goes up to millions as well. We don't need to worry about that just yet. So this number will be 7.687. Remember, we never say 7.687 like we would if it was on this side, because these aren't hundreds, these are tenths, hundredths, and thousands. So the number is 7.687. Okay, so if we were doing hexagons and pentagons work today, we're subtracting from the thousands. We're finding the number that comes before when you count in thousands. Okay, so we're still going to have a 7. That's not going to change. The units are not going to change if we're taking away from the thousands. We're still going to have a 6 in the tenths column. We're still going to have an 8 in the hundredths column. But we're going to subtract 1,000th from the 7. So 7 thousandths, subtract 1,000 is of course 6 thousandths. So you can see it's just 1 less in the thousandths column. Just like it says in the task, complete the table below, finding the number before when you count in thousands. So in my example here, you're not going to mess with the hundreds, the units, or the tens, but you're going to change not the tenths, not the hundredths, but the thousandths. That thousandth is 1 less than the thousandth here, because we're finding the number before when you count in thousands. Okay, another example will be here, 3.994. Subtract 1 from the 4 would be a 3. Okay, and then just like the other examples, what happens here? What happens here? You're still going to have a 9, a 4, and a 9, but then what happens? I'll give you a clue, there'll be a 4 here, but we don't know what's going to go in these boxes. Probably, well, we'll think about it. We'll come to that if you can show your place value knowledge. Here might be a tricky one as well. If you take away 1 from here, how does that affect the 5 in the hundredths column? Okay, P7, I appreciate that's a little bit tricky. That's why I wanted to show you the activity here. Tomorrow, in tomorrow's lesson, we're doing exactly the same thing, but we're finding the number after. Okay, so I'll record a similar video for that. Okay, lovely stuff. Thank you very much, and good luck.